Jacobi had volunteered for service in World War I, where he won the Iron Cross. He then worked as a film director in Hollywood in the 1930s, before returning to Germany and meeting his Aryan wife. To marry her, he had to falsify his papers. He remained in Germany under this new, false identity. Jacobi was a German patriot, and despite the frightening violence against Jews, he was determined to fight for the fatherland, if he got the chance. He put himself forward for the Army Reserves. Jacobi was a willing volunteer, but as a full Jew, he should never have been allowed in the army. At this stage, half-Jews and quarter-Jews, on the other hand, were still allowed to serve the fatherland in the military. As a result, they were safe from persecution for the time being, especially as Adolf Hitler needed them. September the 1st, 1939, the Germans attacked Poland. The German army rolled across the border. In its ranks were thousands of half-Jews and quarter-Jews, the so-called Mischlinge. Many of them saw fighting for the Reich as a way of gaining favor and a way to protect their families. One example of a patriotic Mischling was half-Jew Werner Goldberg. An article in a German newspaper in 1939 talked of the victory in Poland and showed a heroic image of a young warrior, the archetypal German soldier. It was Goldberg.
He was blonde, very clear blue eyes. For 3 months, he was in a lot of German military propaganda newspapers and magazines as the typical Aryan-looking soldier, until they found out that his father was a Jew.
An estimated 100,000 other soldiers with Jewish heritage fought alongside Werner Goldberg in Hitler's conquering army. It showed just how flawed the Nuremberg laws were. It wasn't just lesser ranks who were compromised by the Nuremberg laws. Some of Hitler's most senior generals fell into the same dangerous categories. Three of Hermann Göring's top Luftwaffe officers were Mischlinge, including his most senior and capable Air Force commander, Field Marshal Milch. Milch had overseen the development and re-equipping of the Luftwaffe and built it into the modern and powerful force that spearheaded Hitler's blitzkrieg. He reported directly to Göring.
But many people have asked, how in the world does a half-Jew, Milch, become a field marshal in Hitler's military? He was a brilliant mind, no question about it. Ran Lufthansa in the 20s. Hitler called him in to help run the Luftwaffe. He was the most prominent personality for personnel planning and production. Hitler had said in 1936 that there are two names linked with the birth of our Luftwaffe, Milch's and Göring's.
Even though he was essential to the war effort, Milch was investigated by the Gestapo under the Nuremberg laws. His father, Anton Milch, was a Jew. Göring would have none of it. In his book, he decided who was a Jew and not the Nuremberg laws.
When rumors were flying around about his Jewish background, his mother went to the officials and said, "My Jewish husband, Anton Milk, is actually not the father of my 6 children. It's my Aryan lover, who happens to be my uncle, and by the way, he's dead."
Goering encouraged Milch's mother to sign an affidavit confirming that her Aryan uncle had fathered her children. He personally took it to Hitler, and Milch was declared of pure Aryan ascent.
There was different classifications of exemptions that Hitler would give to half-Jews and quarter-Jews to remain in the service or be promoted. The first types were just Genehmigungen, or special permissions, that allowed a person to remain in the military. The second types were also Genehmigungen, sometimes called Sondergenehmigungen, special exemptions, that allowed somebody to remain in the military and be promoted. And then there were other guys that immediately just got the straight-out Deutschblütigkeitserklärungen, and these were the German blood declarations.
These exemptions, like the German blood declarations, let Hitler have the pick of those men with Jewish ancestry and Aryanize them if he deemed them worthy. He often personally oversaw individual cases, and only a small proportion were ever successful. In all, 22 generals and 7 admirals were Aryanized. They included Admiral Bernhard Roger, a quarter Jew who received a German blood declaration in 1939.
He was a tragic figure. His mother's mother was Jewish. He lost his wife and mother-in-law to suicide because of the Nazi persecution. He was persecuted. He was a deeply religious man. He hated the Nazis, but on the other side, he had this duty that he felt obligated to his fatherland.
Roger served in command of the Atlantis, a merchant ship converted to carry guns and which harried Allied convoys. Roger sank or captured almost 24 Allied ships for a combined total of over 150,000 tons of shipping. He went on to win the coveted Knight's Cross with oak leaves. In May 1940, Hitler's armies invaded France in another devastating blitzkrieg attack. France and her allies were crushed in just over a month. It was another stunning victory. Once again, half-Jewish and quarter-Jewish soldiers fought in the ranks. Among them, quarter-Jew Fritz Steinwasser, and amazingly, Edgar Jacobi, the full Jew who'd falsified his marriage papers. He'd been called up just before the invasion. He led a company of combat cameramen and photographers. Jacobi's newsreels captured the lightning advance of the German panzers. Jacobi and many other soldiers of Jewish descent fought with distinction. They hoped their loyal service would be rewarded and get them acceptance in mainstream German society. But they were wrong. Because when they returned to Germany, half-Jews, first-degree Mischlinge, were expelled from the army. Instead, they could only take up low-grade work. Werner Goldberg, the ideal German soldier, was one of them. It was a callous way to treat men who had risked their lives for their fatherland. quarter Jews, second-degree Mischlinge, were still allowed to serve. Rolf von Sudau had been called up for military service and was fighting in Russia as a panzer gunner. Von Sudau had never felt Jewish, so he decided to lie rather than admit he was a quarter Jew.
I lied because I want to prove them that I was a brave man and that I'm okay for being an officer. It's quite clear. Any other people would have done the same. They didn't want to do it. It's quite, yeah. I want to show them that all the mixture things and all these bad things which are told about the Mischlinge, that's not correct.
However, on the eve of promotion, Rolf von Sudau would pay for his deception. He was summoned by his commanding officer.
There came the major and says, Herr von Sudau, we have to speak, and you can't be that. And he knew about my documents that I'm quarter Jew. And then the whole thing was up and I was going to prison.
He was imprisoned for 21 days as a punishment for his actions. Von Sudau was demoted, but he would eventually rejoin his unit and continue to fight for Hitler. Another man who had lied and was found out was propaganda officer Edgar Jacobi. His true identity as a full Jew had been revealed. Jacobi was sent back to Germany and imprisoned. As a full Jew, he and countless others were now in grave danger. Because in the autumn of 1941, Germany's full Jews started to be deported, initially to ghettos in Eastern Europe, and then to extermination camps. But Fritz Steinwasser, the quarter Jewish soldier, did chance upon a horrifying spectacle whilst serving on the front line at Duneberg in Latvia. He was stuck in a traffic jam of advancing German vehicles when he saw the reality of the Nazi policy of genocide towards the Jews.
Ich war auf der Brücke und konnte dann in dieses Gefängnis einschauen, und dann war hier der Block des Gefängnisses und dann stand dann eine Reihe von SS-Leuten mit Peitschen und Stöcken und dann trieben die dann so die armen Schweine da, die armen Menschen, nackt ausgeschnitten, ob alt oder jung, und durch diese Gasse mit Schlägen. Und dann mussten sie sich niederknien und dann kriegten sie einen Kopfschuss. Und dann sprangen dann einige in die Grube und haben die dann die Leichen sortiert, damit sie nicht kreuz und quer durcheinander lagen. Und das war für mich ein furchtbarer Anblick. Und ein alter Mann mit einem Bart und ein kleiner Junge von vielleicht 4, 5 Jahren an der Hand, und der Junge weinte und dann hat ein alter Mann ihn getröstet und hat dann gesagt, was weiß ich nicht, ich habe es nicht verstanden. Aber dann zu ihm zugeredet und dann hat der Junge lächelnd seinen Großvater angestrahlt. Also, mir ging das Herz kaputt.
Hast du gedacht damals, dass das könnte dir oder deiner Großvater sein?
Natürlich, natürlich. In dem Augenblick habe ich meinen Großvater vor mir gesehen, der zwar noch nicht damals deportiert worden ist.
Fritz Steinwasser's grandfather, along with 43,000 other German Jews, was later sent to the Theresienstadt concentration camp in Czechoslovakia. His grandfather died there in 1943. Fritz would not find this out until after the war.